It's over a quarter of a century since Putin was first elected president of Russia, but his presidency didn't begin with a democratic flourish. It began with a lie. Boris Yeltsin, racked with scandal, fearing prosecution, handed power to his chosen successor on the 31st of December 1999. The promise was stability, the price was truth. And from the outset, Putin's rhetoric was laced with contradiction. In his 2000 manifesto, he pledged a decent life, a rejuvenated economy, and above all, freedom. He reassured the public, our press today is free, and it forever will be free. And 25 years on, the same press is shackled, gutted, and exiled. Political opponents are imprisoned or assassinated. They are the subject of lies and legal fictions. And the decent life promised has given way to repression at home and bloodshed and deceit abroad. Putin lies because it is expedient. He lies because he needs to sustain a fiction, that Russia is always the victim, never the aggressor, that its enemies are always scheming, never responding. He lies about history. He claims Ukraine is not a real country, that the Soviet Union dissolved out of benevolent Russia will, that NATO is a military threat to Russia, that he even lies about language, calling an invasion a special military operation and war crimes precision strikes. These aren't accidents. These are the pillars of power. These are the substance that he deals with. Take, for example, the Kursk submarine disaster, tragedy in 2000. Just months into his presidency, Putin delayed rescue efforts, declined Western help, blamed the Navy, and all 118 sailors perished. Why? Because transparency would reveal weakness. He believed in weakness is fatal to the strongman myth. When COVID-19 hit Russia, the same pattern emerged: delayed responses, doctored statistics, suppressing reporting the truth. That was the Russian state. The Russian state was unprepared, was again obscured behind a fog of deflection. Or take the invasion of Ukraine. Putin claimed Russia was under threat. He said NATO was encircling Ukraine, encircling Russia. He denied intentions to invade. Days before launching an assault, he declared no civilian targets would be hit. Then we had Bucha, Kramatorsk, Irpin, Mariupol. He denies deporting Ukrainian children, even as international investigators have documented the systematic erasure of their identities. He denies Russian troops have ever used chemical weapons, and yet they've been seen and catalogued, identified, even as the OPCW finds evidence to the contrary. These lies are not aberrations, they are systemic, they are routine, it's state policy, it's Putin's nature. And why does Putin lie so much? Because the truth threatens legitimacy. Because if Russians knew, if they really knew the scale of the failure, the corruption, the brutality, his power would evaporate like that. As things stand, censorship is total. Over 20,000 Russians have been detained since 2022 for anti-war speech. VPN usage has risen by 2,500%. The BBC now broadcasts via shortwave radio again. Independent journalists are jailed or worse. The Putin has cultivated a society in which to question is to betray. His regime teaches there is no Russia without Putin, as parliamentarian Vasyslav Volodin put it. In other words, truth itself is unpatriotic. And Volodin is a very strange man, very much a man in hiding. When Putin sat down with Tucker Carlson, his fabrications flowed freely. He claimed Ukraine banned peace talks, neglected to mention the ban was him, personally. He denied ever suggesting America would strike Russia, despite having said precisely that in February 2022. He misquoted Bismarck. He misrepresented NATO. He revised 4 centuries of Ukrainian history. It was an imperialist hallucination, cloaked as a lecture. And this is what autocracy does to reality. You saw it with Saddam Hussein. It bends until it breaks. His lies are not merely defensive. They are the weapons of mass deception, deployed to obscure, distract, and justify. They don't reflect confidence. They reflect fear of accountability, of legacy, of death. He names no successor because to do so invites comparisons, ambition, and mortality. Like Stalin, he clings to power not to build but to prevent collapse. So we must ask, what happens when the lies stop working? What happens when people realize that the Smeg fridge is a reality? At the moment, it's a Schrodinger's cat situation. What happens when the Russian people know, or suspect, or guess, but know that they've been deceived? That is why the second front in this war is information. Russia's greatest vulnerability is not its economy, its army, its diplomats, it's truth. And the Kremlin's manic efforts to suppress it tell us everything. And the West has not done anything to challenge that truth or to challenge those lies. We have the tools to get the message out across the Russian country, and we haven't done it because we think that Russia's lies, that Russia's propaganda is directed at us. How arrogant. Russia's propaganda is directed at Russia. It's what keeps Putin in power. And Putin has ruled longer than anyone since Stalin, but lies, like regimes, eventually crumble. And the question is no longer if, but when, and whether the Russian people, when that moment comes, will remember what was promised, a decent life. Let's hope they ask the only question that matters. Was it ever delivered? Do they actually have a decent life? Does that life continue?